to round 11, and what a game it was yesterday at the MCG. Richmond took on Fremantle. Well, the Tigers, can they get on a roll and declare themselves a finals contender? Yesterday, a hiccup, Croft.
Yeah, a hiccup for sure, but Fremantle were very good, and they've certainly kept their finals hopes alive. Richmond 9-12, 66, Fremantle 12-6, 78. Edwards kicked 3, Pavlich was super, Ballantyne was a pest and did really well. Super coach Shane Tuck, in those conditions, very suited. Marich Cochin had a real go. De Boer, Johnson and Griffin, I'll talk about him a little bit later, he was super. But the Tigers started really well. They looked really good. They looked hungry and intense, and they hit the scoreboard nice and early. But every time Fremantle went forward, Matty Pavlich just looked dangerous. And as you can see there was 3 or 4 Richmond players around him, but he was just finding the footy. He was in red-hot form, and he kicked 3 goals for the quarter. It was interesting because Sandilands was dominating in the ruck in the first couple of minutes, but he had to be subbed straight out with the turf toe. So all of a sudden that threw Fremantle around. Stephen Hill went off with a bit of an injury as well. So it looked like it was going to be a really tough day for Fremantle. They were going to be right up against it with their changes. But they just found a gear. They just were intense, Matty Lloyd. They just worked so hard as a team. And they never gave up. It was workmanlike every time they went forward, but they just got the job done.
Yeah, Croft, I thought that through the midfield was an area the pace of Richmond might get hold of Fremantle, but I thought a match-up that's worked most of the year for Fremantle. Crowley's job on Brett Delidio. Yeah. Delidio wasn't a factor all day, was he? Yeah,
he was magnificent, Crowley. We weren't sure who he was going to go to. We thought maybe Cochin or a Delidio, but he just went with him everywhere, and Hardwick was just unsure where to put Delidio. He wanted to try and get him into the game, but just wasn't able to. And Ryan Crowley, I reckon he'd be leading their best and fairest at the moment with the jobs he's been doing this year, and he had a massive influence on this game. Actually, Stephen Hill went to Cochin early in the game, which I thought was an interesting matchup because they were just going to obviously take Cochin on with Hill's run, and I thought that was pretty interesting. He kicked a magnificent goal, and as soon as Sandilands went out of the game, Griffin obviously took the #1 ruck role, and he was super. He had 44 hit-outs. He kicked a great goal, as we saw, and I reckon it was one of his best games in tricky conditions. And I just want to take you through the contested ball winners. De Boer, Barlow, Hill, they all had 17, 12 and 15, and plus there was five others who got over 10 contested possessions throughout the match. And their tackling, they tackled 117 times. It was just a different Fremantle, and Fremantle, you could tell that their season was on the line. If they lost this, possibly goodbye any finals, but all of a sudden they've resurrected themselves.
The Freo were up by 6 points at half-time, Crawford, and I just felt, being at the ground, that maybe Richmond, who love to possess the footy a lot, they maybe got themselves in a fair bit of trouble. And would you agree that Freo, as you said earlier, did play the conditions, which were wet and slippery, far better than Richmond?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a hard one for Richmond because their form's been really good with really spreading from a contest and using the footy and linking up and trying to create space and movement. But Fremantle just played the conditions better. They moved the ball and they were harder at the contest, which is disappointing from a Richmond point of view because we know that they're certainly heading on the right track. But I think when you reflect on this, they'll learn a lot from it. It's good that they're actually going to learn halfway through the season, and they're not going to learn from once they do hit the finals if they're good enough to get there. And, I think they'll learn a lot. De Boer was terrific.
13 tackles.
He had almost 30 touches, very underrated, just getting the job done.
What did he play, small forward?
Played, through the middle, and he just was super. Main had a real crack. See there's a lot of space. Yeah. Richmond tried to put a couple of numbers behind the footy, but they were good enough to get the ball into their hands, but then just kick it into space. And Mundy was really good through the middle, Matty Lloyd, and it was just probably a season-defining win because their record at the MCG, they'd lost their last 10 matches. Sandilands goes out early. Hill hurts himself, but then finds a way to get himself into the match, which I thought was a real good effort. They have had poor form over the last few games. I just think it's one of the better wins for the season up against a really good Richmond side who were just off a bit.
Yeah, with 19 this last quarter, 19 inside 50s to Richmond, just 6 to Fremantle, but just Ross Lyon, all the numbers back behind the footy. He had an open forward line. They scored 3 goals out of those 6, Bill, and
Game over?
Yeah, it was game over. Yeah.
You did like Stephen Morris for the Tigers, who we've all liked this year.
Yeah, he just has a go, and he actually reminds me a lot of Damien Hardwick. But you have a look how hard he is. He flies in here. He actually hurt his shoulder during this match with Shepherd against Pavlich, trying to do the team things. But you have a look at this. He just leaves his opponent. He flies through the middle. He doesn't care about being hurt. You can see his shoulders strapped up there. And they've certainly found a player who reminds everyone of Damien Hardwick, but also someone who's prepared to put their body on the line. And I thought he's played on Milne recently, he's played on Rioli, he played on Ballantyne yesterday, and he just has a red-hot go.
Well, we're about to see just how well he is going by your votes, Crawls.
Oh, well, I couldn't slot him in, actually. Went on Fremantle. Matty Pavlich was magnificent, 6 goals. De Boer, he probably should have got an 8. Ryan Crowley's job on Deledio, as Matty Lloyd did say. And Luke McFarlane, who played on Jack Revolt, did a great job, and it was a super win from the Dockers' point of view. Richmond can rebound next week, which is a good thing going into the bye. They can get the 4 points, they can have that rest and then focus on Adelaide and Melbourne. And Fremantle have the bye, and then they've got some massive games, Essendon and Collingwood, and then the Bulldogs. So a very good win from the Dockers.